so they can send it back to Germany. I was there at every one of those moments personally to witness it. I don't give you a generic. I was there as a little boy witnessing of the expulsion from the main city of Kilkowska. They confiscated all good belongings. And one of the things that I had to witness was standing in the back of my grandfather's little synagogue. While they were burning down the synagogue and laughing. What did they do? They took the holy scrolls, the Torahs, and set them afire. And laughing about this. In 1997, I went back to Poland for the second or third time to recover some of those burned Torahs, and I did bring back 2 of them here to the United States. One of them is housed at Temple B'nai Israel, and the other one is housed in Chabad that I restored in order to give it to them because they belonged to me and to my grandfather. That's the synagogue. That another one, the big one that was burned down. The city of Lodz is an entire city, but what you can see is this little piece of the ghetto. 4.5 square kilometers, which is about 2.3 square miles for a population of 230,000 people. Can you imagine 230,000 people living on this campus here? That's about what this campus is. Or maybe it's even larger. But we managed. We had guards, and every day you could find different uniformed police. They'd bring them in from all over. And if the humiliation wasn't good enough, they started real hangings. I show you this one because they constructed a gallows. And they brought out 40 people. We all had to go out to the main plaza and watch this as the hangings were going on. This is only a slice from an 8mm movie that I took out. I was standing right at this corner, right here, watching this. And here I am, a little kid, had to watch as they were hanging these people, one by one, as they were hanging my teacher. Not a nice sight to watch, but I'll never forget that. And they kept hanging more people from posts for no reason, putting up signs that they were collaborators. Our Oskar Schindler. Oskar Schindler was a nice man. At least he had compassion. Hans Bieber was not a compassionate Nazi. He worked for his father throughout his life, but he was a Nazi party member. When he worked for his father in Hamburg, he was a salesman for insurance. He couldn't make a living. When the Nazis came to power, he started making a good living off of us who slaved away for all these years because he made a deal with the Nazi regime in Berlin. And the deal was, he will work us to death, and in return, we will receive food, and that's all. And that food was the 600 calories on a daily basis. He confiscated everything that we had, with the exception of, you might say, a pair of shoes, or a piece of clothing. But he made himself 13 million Reichsmark, which in those days was equivalent to about $3 billion in his pocket, working off of us. Then there came ordinances. You cannot deal in German money any longer. You have to have monopoly money, called Quittums. That's him. In 1942, I was one of the little boys who was selected to carry food on his birthday, as you can see, and he insisted that all pictures be taken in color. And then he complained to Kodak because the chemicals did not develop correctly in color, so he insisted that they send him better chemicals. In 1942, I was the one who carried that cake for his birthday, but we were only allowed to carry it, not eat any of it. The ghetto. In the ghetto, we also had to construct a new camp inside for gypsies. They brought in 10,000 gypsies into the ghetto. 6 months later, there wasn't a gypsy left alive. They either starved him to death, they beat him to death, or shipped him off to another concentration camp called Helmo, which was a camp where they just burned the people. We also had a camp for Christian children because the parents left them there in the ghetto, 3,500 of them. And we had to care for them. And when a Christian child died, we cannot bury him in a Jewish cemetery. So we had to build a little corner outside the wall for Christians to bury him there. And the mother sent a letter to the authorities wanting to take possession of the body. And she received a note back from the authorities, from the German authorities, sorry, you can't have that because you were a bad mother. You left your child inside. So she insisted, how about just give me the clothing? They denied that request also. Out of the 3,500 Christian children, over a period of 2 years, there wasn't a Christian child left alive because they too starved them or sent them off to Fenmo in order to be gassed. We had to give up everything. All ordinances were posted in 3 languages, Jewish, German, and Polish. This one says furs. You had to give up the furs. You had to give up picture. You had to give up the cameras. No electricity between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 in the morning, or no heat. Because if you do, you will be fined 150 Reichsmark. And remember, we were not allowed to have Reichsmark. We were only allowed to have monopoly money, because that 150 Reichsmark in those days was approximately $500 US. Here's the registration that my father lied to the Gestapo, that I was born 17 September 1927, that I was a student. Here's the work permit, the ration cards. This is for bread. You had to have money to buy the bread. If you didn't have the money, you didn't have the bread. For some of you, you don't understand what World War II, even the United States, there were rations here at one time or another. It's difficult to live. I was fortunate by working as a youngster, as a teenager, in the factory. I was given a special meal at lunchtime, because this is what it says: für Jugendliche Arbeiter, for young workers, a bowl of soup. It contained mainly vegetables and hot water. No meat, nothing else except just vegetable soup. And being a camera hound, as I still am today, every time I see a camera, I carry along with me all the time to take pictures, because I'm going to take a picture with you guys here to prove that I was here. Not only that Ms. Larson invited me, but to prove it to my children. Because my children ask me, Dad, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I still work as an engineer on a daily basis, but I make time to come to schools. So to prove to them, I take a picture with each class to prove to them. So that's me during that lunch break. To show you what the Germans already had planned way back in the 30s, when the Nazi Party was formed, as to what will be in 1943 as far as food. This was rations for bread. Well, here's meat rations. As you can tell, when it gets down to the Jews, none whatsoever. Fat, none. Potatoes, a little bit. And if you put it on a chart of today, carbohydrates, protein, and fats, you will see that it's an impossibility to survive. Because in the ghetto we had beginning 230,000. It may be a boring subject for some of you, but I want you to remember one thing. This world is not for me, it's for you. It's what you do with it can happen if you don't do something about it. I know your life is primarily text messaging, videoing, multitasking, Nike shoes, but there's more to life than that. History repeats itself, and it can happen in these United States as well. For some of you taking classes in history will find that in the 1940s, on the West Coast, we had a general who decided that Japanese people are a threat to the United States. And we shipped them all off to camps, confiscated all of their belongings. No different than Hitler did, with the one exception. The United States did not produce any gas ovens. And to this day, the Japanese people are still trying to get restitution for their property. But it happened here in the United States. This was 1 week's rations that we were allowed to purchase. We didn't have the money, so you didn't get it. We had a fire department. No benzene, no gasoline. So it didn't make much difference. We had the truck. That was our transportation department. This was our sanitation department, where they took the waste and buried it. If you go back today to Poland, like I was here just in October of this year, last year. Oh, it's a new year. I was there in October making a video for the Polish Ministry of Education that they invited me to do, because they finally realized it's time to teach the Holocaust after all these years. I went back to this place. It's next to the cemetery. The cemetery there contains 250,000 people in one mass grave that died in that camp in the Lodz ghetto. We had a streetcar. Unfortunately, you couldn't use it because it was Christians only. In searching through, I found myself in film, in one of those German archival films. All children under the age of 10 were told that they have to send them to a colony because they're too young to work. You can see the teacher over here and how nicely the children were lined up. And where did they send them? They sent them all to Helmo in order to exterminate them. Because at the outset, the children were placed in this hermetically sealed bus or wagon, and they drove around with the exhaust pipe sticking on the inside. And this was a very short way. This was a difficult way to kill 6 million people. This is how they invented the big ovens. Here's the factories. A friend of mine up in Oregon, Hans Bigleiser, he came from Hamburg with all the German Jews into the ghetto, and he recognized himself in the picture. That's my father in 1941, having his bowl of soup. That's me in the tailor shop on a cutting. This was a bandsaw. Clothing stacked, layers of cloth, 30, 40 high, and I had to cut it. And luckily, I still have all my 10 fingers and 2 thumbs, because had I been a little careless, I wouldn't have that left, because that bandsaw could cut it off very well. We had all kinds of factories We even